there's 52% of 70 and older watch YouTube at least once a month. 70 and older watch YouTube. That's out of 2 billion people. So that's 1 billion people.
Wow.
So 1 billion people in their 70s are leveraging the platform to consume content. But yeah, when you buy in, you just say, look, and you might even admit, I don't fully understand it, but I know it's valuable. I know we got to be there. I know we got to commit to this church. I know we got to lean in.
Hey guys, welcome to the Church Media Guys show. If you want to learn how to use and exploit media and technology so that you can take the gospel to the world, start now by clicking that subscribe button and ringing that bell. I'm sitting here with the legendary Cannell from Think Media and one of the creative geniuses and brains behind the Video Influencers channel. Thanks for hanging out.
So pumped to be here.
Appreciate it. How long have you been doing video?
I've been doing video since 2003. I started in my local church.
Yeah.
The youth pastor, Jeff Morris, handed me a video camera and Adobe Premiere Pro 1.0.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like a lot of versions ago. And I started making videos for my youth group. And you know this, your first videos are your worst videos.
Oh, yeah.
They were terrible. And so, yeah, I just started making videos and I got excited about it, got passionate about it. Eventually, after about a year, the senior pastor was like, hey, these aren't too bad. Start making these on Sundays as well. And before YouTube started, I personally was making, editing 104 videos a year.
Wow.
Because it was Wednesday night, it was Sunday,
2 a week, right.
Before YouTube started.
Yeah.
And I was kind of getting used to creating a lot of content. And I think that that's one thing when I think about church leaders and different things. We're so busy, you got a lot of different things going on, but it was kind of getting me my creative muscles of creating content. And then the first YouTube channel we started was in 2007. For our church in a small town, hour north of Seattle. I didn't know what I was doing, but titles, thumbnails, and so I've just been in this for quite a while. And eventually, I wrote a book called YouTube for Churches a few years ago.
Right? Yeah, I saw
Yeah, and I've always just been so passionate about the potential of YouTube for growing the local church.
Where do you think the church sits in relation to YouTube? Do you think they are using it effectively, sort of on a macro level in general? Do you think churches are using YouTube, I would say properly, if there's such a thing?
Yeah, I mean, some are, but on a macro level, not really. A few years ago, and I think there's more acceptance now, I did an article with Church Marketing Sucks about Vimeo versus YouTube. And I think there was some apprehension to get on YouTube because there is a lot of sketchy stuff there.
Sure.
And my argument was, well, last time I checked, Jesus told us that we were supposed to be in the world, but just not of it. Yeah. And the truth is, YouTube is where people are. There's over 2 billion monthly active users. It's international, it's in so many countries. That's with a logged in with a Gmail account. And so I think we need to be where people are, and we're called to be salt and light in those places, and YouTube's a place we need to be. But a lot of times churches, they have apprehension. I think sometimes Facebook makes more sense, and it seems like, you know, and even Instagram, but I think there's massive opportunity for YouTube, and most churches are not leaning into it. But I'm empathetic because maybe they're not sure how.
That's something I see, is they don't know how to make use of it effectively. A lot of churches that do use YouTube, and we counsel them, get on there, and like that, being in but not of. Justin and I tell people that it's like a mission field.
Yeah.
And YouTube is you have to treat it as such.
I believe that 100%.
If you're going to send a team to some country to meet with people, you're not going to tell them, okay, great, let's get on a plane and go back to our church, so that you can then become a part of our church. You minister there and you meet the needs there. Where do you think churches can apply YouTube, or how can they use it as a ministry tool more than just a library for 45-minute sermons?
Well, to take your example further, if you are going to the mission field, what you're also not going to do, and missionaries have failed at this, when they, like, for instance, imposed Western culture on a non-Western culture. The Bible doesn't teach that.
Right.
It teaches us to, of course, teach the essentials of Jesus' teachings and discipleship, but not our own preferences and behaviors and like how we act in America versus what's happening in, say, Uganda or Europe or whatever. And
kind of like Paul said, when in Rome, I eat like a Roman, I act like a Roman.
Exactly, and I think what that would also mean, though, is that just like you would want to learn the language and the culture of a country you're in ministering as a missionary, you need to learn the language and the culture of YouTube.
Yeah.
And so knowing the psychology, the mentality there. So what's that mean? I mean, I think, yes, absolutely. 101 is putting your sermons up on YouTube.
Sure.
I mean, and doing that in a strong way with clear titles, good thumbnails. But then it's also thinking that maybe shorter form. One of the big opportunities, I believe, is that people all over the world are asking questions. Ultimately, a majority of Jesus' ministry was answering questions.
Yeah.
And if you can go to Google, you go to YouTube, you can search. People are asking questions about who is God, about relationships, about the Bible, about comparing and contrasting different religions and things like that. And I think it's the responsibility of the local church, not just the youth ministry or the young people, but all ages, to be answering those questions with biblical truth in creative ways. And I think I'm fascinated because YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world.
Right.
And so it's one thing to just be pushing out your sermons. I think it's another thing to be engaging in the local and global conversation around important issues. As the pastor or as the executive pastor or as someone in the women's ministry, whatever, I think that you really got to get in and engage. And then learning that maybe the format of those videos, whether it's making a funny face or colors or emojis, or all these types of things, that's the language of these social media platforms. It's the culture. And so I think, there's always, the church has a resistance to sometimes new forms of media, and we think, why are you jump cutting quick, or why are you trying to be cool or contemporary? But I think it was Martin Luther, right, that would take bar songs and turn them into hymns so that he could connect with people. And so
some of our most hallowed traditions revolve around a song about getting drunk in the beautiful wench and stuff like that.
Exactly, right? And so I think there's something about learning even how maybe younger generations are thinking, millennials, Gen Z, which if we lose them, we lose.
Right.
And so, and then adapting the message, the unchanging message of the gospel and of the Bible, but into new forms. The message never changes, but of course the methods do.
Right.
And so, and so I think there's something to, it's funny because he obviously had to hear those songs somehow. He knew those songs, he heard them. And so I think there's also something about immersion in the culture of YouTube. You got to kind of walk through, just like any good pastor is going to go through a city, meet people, catch the vibe of what's happening so that he can minister effectively there. I think there's something about walking through YouTube, kind of feeling out what's happening there. And my heart was burdened when I saw a lot of YouTube creators that had massive influence. And I saw that maybe they were doing music or maybe they were doing this, but then what people began to look up to them, so they would ask them questions. They would do like Ask Me Anything episodes.
Right, yeah.
And they would be teaching on sex, relationships. They'd be teaching on these things, and I was like, man, they have all this influence, and they are teaching, of course, things contrary to what we believe. This is the thing we're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
Is engaging culture and engaging people, but we got to reach them with a biblical worldview. We're it.
Yeah.
Jesus left us in charge.
Right.
So.
Wow. So what would you tell a pastoral staff or a media ministry team or whatever that are looking at YouTube, but maybe in some aspects they may be seeing resistance? How would you encourage them to proceed? They know they need to do it.
I mean, I think,
but it's an uphill battle.
I think it's the idea of, two things there. I think what I would recommend people do is maybe start a show. I mean, I think that's kind of like a Q&A show would be a simple thing to do. It could be one question a week.
Yeah.
And I'm saying instead of, and not just the sermon, but, and I think there's also opportunities for sit down, like one question a week with pastor, and maybe being willing to answer tough questions.
Yeah.
And really engage. And that could be distributed on YouTube. It could be a 5-minute answer, a 10-minute answer. It could be a Tuesday show. It could be helping your church as well as the world, because it could serve locally. You could send it out in an email newsletter.
Sure.
You could say, hey, we want to help equip you to be able to answer questions and be able to engage your friends or your family. And that could be a 5 to 10 minute show that comes out every week. You could also even batch produce them. You could maybe say, hey, what are some of the big questions that are inside of our church, or what are the questions that the world or that the internet is searching for? And
Will I go to hell if I kill myself? Stuff like that.
Stuff like that. That really good question.
Edgy stuff that's uncomfortable.
And I also think that the thing too is that you can also, you don't have to just lean on YouTube with that content. If you're shooting that content, you could actually not make it a YouTube show. It also could live other places. You could upload that on Facebook to meet people right where they are as well, and that'd just be a way of putting out basically episodic content. And I think I think it's important to start, but also it's important to start simple. Complexity is the enemy of execution.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people think, they see what maybe a larger church is doing, and they start thinking, okay, well, we need all these cameras, and we need all this stuff, and we need to do 45 things. No, you don't need to do anything. You need your phone, and that's it.
Right.
Like, you just, start.
We're using one right over there.
I love it, absolutely. And the fact that you could grow from there, and maybe the show turns into something else, and the team grows, and you get buy-in. But try to start with the most, we talk about MED, the minimum effective dose.
Yeah.
And I think a weekly show, 5 to 10 minutes from your local church that you guys are producing is a great idea. If they're experiencing resistance, I think you just need persistence. And it's you need the why behind it. It's never good to attack people with just, we need to do this because we need to do it. But when you've got real biblical truth to support it, I mean, I was thinking about these things that there's actually quite a bit of marketing in the Bible, yet marketing is a scary word to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, what Jesus would invest in marketing, there's verses where it says his disciples went ahead of him to towns to prepare them for him coming.
Yeah.
That's Facebook ads.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like going ahead where you have a new church launching. Yeah, churches are like, oh, we shouldn't do Facebook ads, when that's like the most effective use of your dollars compared to mailers or other forms of media. So I think it's just kind of reframing our mindset. And I get it. There's boards and there's elders and there's the old school and there's the new school. And it's not that it will be without a fight, but I think we need to be willing to fight. Not that people are our enemy, but it's some old ideas and some old mindsets need to be renewed.
Yeah. What was you were saying, that every company, every brand needs to learn how to adapt and pivot according to the changes and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think the church has a hard time doing. We're so steeped in tradition and all that, but just like any other brand, any other organization, they have to start thinking like that, I think. Or they dwindle.
Yeah. And I think another thing to really think through is that I think we should prioritize being effective.
Yes.
And we should question our methods, not the message, the methods, and say, hey, is this still effective?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever your beliefs about him, such a legend in the church world, and as an author and person of impact, Rick Warren wrote the book Purpose-Driven Life, of course, and the book Purpose-Driven Church. It's just a framework to say, hey, are these ministries or are these efforts or are these behaviors still aligned with our purpose, and are they still accomplishing? Because if you boil down your purpose, I mean, our churches need to have unique expressions. We're not all the same. We need to know our unique style and flavor, because we're not for everybody. Your church is not for everybody.
Right.
But on the same hand, I think that to really choose to be effective, you have to say, is this working? And what could we do to maybe retire old ministries or old methods? And you switch to service times and people are losing their mind. It's like you add some lights because you care about reaching people, not about being cool.
Right.
You want to reach next generation or keep things interesting. And we're like, why would we include worldly lights? And you're like, man, you gotta let that stuff go, man.
Yeah.
It's about being effective, and that all of us are on the same mission: make disciples for Jesus Christ.
Yeah, right.
Share the good news. And I think doing that in new and creative ways and embracing new forms of media. And then I also think realizing that it's also going to be a progress, or it's going to be a progression. So in some cases, you could get maybe a board or somebody that says, we tried this for 2 weeks and it didn't work. How many works in 2 weeks?
Yeah, how many companies do an ad campaign or launch a product or something like that, and the only example I ever see of that is in Hollywood, where if they don't get X amount of viewers in their ratings and stuff, we may never see anything beyond that pilot that came out, or they get 2 or 3 episodes in and they can it, or they get into the first season and there's this little following that sees that it's working, but they cut it out anyway because there's no big ROI. But in the church, ROI is a different type of thing. It's much more of a long-term play.
One of the big things I've also been thinking about specifically for churches is actually that to make this work though, there has to be buy-in from the lead pastor, 100%, and not just
The
like
vision flows
not
from
just
him.
to check the box of like, okay, that sounds cool, you guys do it. No, you got to own it.
Yeah.
And I really think that in today's world, here's what we're talking about with social media. It's just communication. And as a lead pastor, you really focus on communication. You spend this time preparing the message, and you've studied hermeneutics and sermon structure, and hopefully, I remember Charles Finney, the great revivalist, he talked about, I want to have the Bible in one hand and a map of human psychology in the other.
Wow.
I want to know what is happening in culture. I want to know where the mindset of people are. And I want to, of course, the Bible is the authority. Those two things work together. Where you know where people are is they're on Facebook. You know where people are is millennials and Gen Z. They're talking in memes.
Oh yeah.
It's a new form of communication, and what we do is we vilify or we put down that form of communication. I believe it's the lead pastor's responsibility to learn how to do Instagram stories.
Yes.
To learn YouTube, to learn Facebook, just like you learned how to use Microsoft Word while you were preparing sermons.
Yeah.
Logos, Bible software.
Yeah.
So it's all for communication.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
all so that you can take the truths of the Word and put those and change people's lives. But now people are on Instagram. I mean, these are not really like the data is been out. It's not a debate. It's not does it work. There's over 1 billion monthly active users on Instagram.
Yes.
There's 2.4 billion monthly active users on Facebook.
Yeah.
So people are there. It becomes our responsibility from the top to the bottom and side to side in our church, our organizations, our Bible schools, and all these different things to learn how to communicate effectively on these platforms. And I think the challenge is, though, we're a lot of times just mailing it in. We take the old form of, like, long form sermon.
Yeah.
You know, if people don't sit for 50 minutes or an hour and a half, you know, I don't know how long you preach, you know, then that's not effective. You know, I mean,
Right.
Paul killed a guy because he preached so long. We need to have, you know, well, it's like, okay, well, cool, but like, your church is shrinking. I mean, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
you gotta, like, is it being effective?
Yeah.
And so I love it. You know, Paul said, I become all things to all people so that I can win some for Christ. We got to be where people are, embracing these tools and learning them. And how long did you take to learn sermon prep, to learn communication, to study speaking? You spent years doing it, and you continue to do it, and you could continue to level up. So that within the patience of waiting to see results, it's a commitment now, and it's a commitment forever, because these things are not going away. Like, you got to commit, and just for the next year, but for the next decade, forever. Like, new media is media.
Yes, it is.
And all these platforms are just where it's going to be. So a commitment to say, man, I might not understand that, and this is kind of weird, and I know there's debates around even like narcissism, and I don't want to take selfies or whatever. We don't have to take selfies, but you got to get your camera out and start communicating and adding value and sharing truth, and then give yourself grace and patience to realize you might be terrible, and it just might not really work for a year, but your sermons were terrible for that first year.
Exactly. And because you don't understand it, that would be like saying, we're not going to try to minister in China because we don't speak Chinese.
Yeah.
You'll find somebody who does. You know, and how many people did you say was on Instagram?
Over 1 billion monthly active users.
Over 1 billion monthly active users on Instagram. And if we ignore it, it's like saying, there's no way we are going to send a mission team to China. Those people could go to hell. That's. I know you talked yesterday about using controversy and picking a fight. It's one of the fights that I do. If we're so willing to send a mission team over for a month to work in some country
and invest money.
Yes.
Invest
money. Yes.
Yeah.
You have people
Human
in the
resources.
Church, you have people in the church that will say, "I will pay for the plane tickets." You know, there's that old lady who's happy to do it. So I'll bet if she understands there's another mission field, she'd be willing to invest in some of the tools and some of the training that's needed to help start being effective in that mission field.
Yep, I agree.
But you got to think like that.
You got to think like that. And I love it that you say you can find someone who will, because as the lead pastor or the executive pastor, you might not be the person who's boots on the ground in China. But the reason people are there is because it was part of your vision.
Yeah.
You stood up, you cast the vision, you talked about the need, you talked about why, and you said, hey, let's invest.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Facebook, like, everyone's on there. Grandma's on Facebook.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Wow. Dude, good insights. I appreciate it. Really good insights. The one of my favorite pastor/evangelists is Greg Laurie, and he said when he started growing his church, and the first time they brought in screens, and we're doing some iMag on the screens, putting his image or putting the video of him preaching up on the screens. There were people that said, I come to church to hear a sermon and watch him talk. I don't come to watch television and stuff. And he adopted the attitude almost immediately that we're going to exploit every medium, whatever it is. And the folks at Life Church, they say we're going to do everything short of sin. To spread the gospel, and that's the attitude that we have to take. And you can take it in small chunks. You don't have to do everything.
Right.
Just pick something and keep moving forward with it and stuff. Dude, thank you for your insights. Thank you for
absolutely. Thank you for what you're doing and the community you're building. I mean, this is such an important ministry. It's such an important message that you're sharing with people, and then equipping, because there is then a lot to learn. Then it's the next thing. It's like, okay, well, I'm bought in, but what do I do next?
Right.
You subscribe here. You watch this repeatedly, so you can get the tools, the tactics, and so I love what you're doing and appreciate you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. We'll see you in the next video. Was that the chair or was that you?
That was a chair.
Sure.